Sally Wright was used to bad outcomes, and unfortunately was used to enduring many adversities that befell her. The woman's father served in the Marine Corps and died during a military operation in the wars of the Middle East. In memory of the heroic past of her father, Sally had his order and an award sheet. The woman's mother, Amanda Wright, did everything in her power to provide her daughter with all the basic necessities after the death of her father. Of course, this could not but affect the health of the unfortunate widow in the most detrimental way. In order for her daughter not to need anything, Amanda worked several jobs at once, thereby trying to increase the family income. Unfortunately, the loving mother never did manage to provide Sally with everything she needed. The fact was that when her daughter was 12 years old, Amanda fell seriously ill. Nevertheless, the woman still continued to work, because otherwise they would not have enough money to even buy food. "Mommy, dear, what can I do to help you?" Sally asked, realizing how hard it was for her mother to continue working. But Amanda always rejected Sally's help, wanting to save her daughter from the hardships of adulthood. The girl's mother died of bilateral pneumonia, complicated by late admission to the hospital. Poor Sally was already preparing herself for life at the orphanage, when it suddenly turned out that her mother's cousin decided to take custody of her. Unfortunately, Elizabeth wasn't exactly the kind aunt who dreamed of raising someone else's child. In fact, the reason behind Elizabeth's decision was the fact that she simply wanted to collect all the allowance that was allocated for the orphans from the local budget. It was very difficult for the girl to live with Aunt Elizabeth because neither she nor her husband worked anywhere and led an unethical lifestyle. Sally spent most of her time locked up in her room, hugging an old doll. The girl was only allowed to leave the house to go to school because even Aunt Elizabeth understood that her niece needed to be educated. When Sally grew up, the cunning woman realized that she no longer would be able to collect the allowance from the state, so she decided to marry off the girl. Moreover, Elizabeth only wanted Sally to marry her friend's son, who worked as a security guard in the supermarket and in the eyes of the narrow-minded woman looked like the perfect man. But Sally certainly did not like Lloyd, who only cared about booze and used cars. "You stupid girl, how could you not get it? With a husband like Lloyd, you'd be set for life," Elizabeth assured her niece. The aunt was getting impatient, wanting to quickly intermarry with the friend who owned a small liquor store on the corner of Main Street. Fortunately, this wasn't part of Sally's plan, and one day she simply ran away from her annoying aunt. Anticipating such a scenario, the young woman pawned the pendant left to her by her mother and used the proceeds to rent a room on the outskirts of the city. Now, having become free, Sally realized that she needed to find a job as soon as possible in order to never return to her aunt's home again. The young woman tried to go around about a dozen companies before she managed to get a job as a cleaner in one of them. Sure, it was hardly Sally's dream job, but she did not lose heart and believed that there would come a point when her life would take a turn for the better. At the company, the young woman was interviewed by the deputy head of the HR department, since the head of the department was always on business trips. Overall, people at the office didn't seem too thrilled over the appearance of the new cleaning lady. The fact was that the company staff wasn't all that great or friendly, and the overall environment was rather hostile. This was mainly due to the fact that the unspoken leader of the office was the senior manager, Melissa Clayton, who was the one to set the tone around the office. "Just look at this new cleaning lady. Look at her cheap outfit. It's as if she forgot it wasn't Halloween," Melissa said, seeing the young cleaning lady. Looking to please the office queen, all the employees laughed in unison, as if on command. Hearing the caustic comment addressed at her, Sally pursed her lips resentfully, but nevertheless, she chose to remain silent. Who am I to argue with the senior manager? My business is to use the mop, the woman thought, unable to control the tears that filled up her eyes. Apart from Melissa's bitter remarks, the management of the company had no complaints regarding Sally's work. With the arrival of the young cleaning lady, the office started to shine with cleanliness, and it was nearly impossible to find dust or marks left by dirty shoes on the light floor. But not every employee of the company treated Sally with prejudice. There were those who really liked the young woman, and Kevin stood out among them. He had recently started working for the company and was still considered a trainee for the most part. The man dreamed of becoming a senior manager after Melissa Clayton would get promoted. There was a rumor going around that the queen of the office was having an ongoing affair with Kevin. Unfortunately, when the young man began to show interest in Sally, the young cleaning lady had no idea that Melissa had her eye on him. Sally and Kenny only got to go to the movies a couple of times and have a bite to eat after work. And then the office gossips informed Melissa that her boyfriend was dating the cleaning lady. Needless to say, the queen of the office was outraged when she found out whom Kevin chose to spend his free time with. "I will destroy her. I'll make her pay for it. Who does she think she is?" Melissa was indignant, clenching her fists angrily. So, the very next morning, when Sally came to work, all the employees pretended not to notice her presence. Even Kevin did not respond to the greeting of the young cleaning lady and sat buried in some papers. "So, do you get it now? I'm in charge of everything around here. So find yourself a boyfriend outside of your company," Melissa grumbled angrily when she ambushed Sally in the back room. "I think that Kevin is already an adult and has the right to decide what he wants to do," Sally objected, having immediately guessed who Melissa was talking about. "You do what you want, but consider this a warning," Melissa hissed. After this unpleasant conversation, Sally spent the rest of the day hoping that Kevin would talk to her, but the man remained silent as a fish. Sure, there was no formal relationship between Kevin and the office cleaner, but the naive woman thought differently. There's little chance that anyone could have even imagined the amount of bitter tears Sally shed, burying her face in her pillow. The woman kept to herself, becoming rather asocial and expecting ridicule from virtually every employee at the office. It's hard to say what could have happened to Sally if she hadn't found a homeless kitten during this very difficult time. Seeing the little creature shrinking from cold and fear near the trash can, the woman approached it and picked it up. "Do not be afraid, dear. Everything will be fine," Sally whispered and put the kitten inside her coat. On her way home, the woman bought some cat food and a carton of milk. The owner of the house where Sally was renting a room just shook her head. "You have nothing to eat yourself, thin as a stick, and yet you get a cat? You're too kind," the woman whispered, and after thinking for a minute or two, she put together some food and handed it to the woman. "Thank you. You don't have to do that. I can manage," Sally murmured, trying to reject the help, but the old woman was adamant. With the appearance of the little kitten, the life of the young woman gradually improved. Sally named the kitten Jerry, after the cartoon mouse of the same name. The kitten was just as tiny and looked like a small rodent. Taking care of the small pet, Sally seemed to have forgotten about her own problems, and life no longer felt cruel and unfair. Unfortunately, Melissa never forgave the cute cleaning lady for dating her boyfriend, and spent all this time coming up with a plan for revenge. And soon, the opportunity presented itself. The fact was that all the staff were expecting their director to come back from a long business trip any day. Everyone at the office was tense in the face of the imminent arrival of higher management. Sally was the only one who didn't worry about it, since the director would hardly be interested in her kingdom of mops and wet rags. If only she knew how wrong she was. It all started with the fact that as soon as the director entered the office, Melissa deliberately spilled a cup of coffee on the floor, pushing it off the table with her elbow. The drink spread into a brown puddle on the floor, right in front of the director. "Melissa, why is the office so dirty? Does no one care about it in my absence?" Mr. Sanchez said, irritated. "Excuse me, but it's the new cleaning lady. It's all her fault. She's a real slob. I don't even know what to do with her," Melissa lied without batting an eye. "Well, if that's the case, please ask her to come to my office," the director said in a tone that brooked no objections. After his words, the entire office froze. Melissa was jubilant. "That's it. I won't have to look at this awful cleaning lady anymore. Mr. Sanchez will certainly fire her now," thought the senior manager, rubbing her hands. When Sally entered the director's office, all the worries of the last days were clearly reflected on her face. "Miss, introduce yourself, please. And please explain yourself and your behavior at the office," Mr. Sanchez asked coldly. Sally turned even paler, and then, having mustered up her courage, she answered, "My name is Sally Wright, and it wasn't my fault, Mr. Sanchez. It's all slander." "What? What did you say? What's your last name? Wright? What was your father's name? Was his name Jack by any chance?" the director asked in surprise. "You're right, Mr. Sanchez. Actually, my father's full name is Jack Oliver Wright." "How did you know that?" Sally asked, amazed. In response to her question, the director put his head in his hands and grimaced, as if he were in pain. Then, having pulled himself together, he said in a trembling voice, "I knew your father, Miss Wright. We served in the Marine Corps together when there was a military conflict in the Middle East. We were under fire. I was wounded, and your father carried me out from under enemy fire. And then he died from a shell explosion," Mr. Sanchez said, stammering on every word. Tears were flowing down the director's face, and it was clear that the man was reliving those terrible events all over again. Sally stepped closer and put her hand on the man's shoulder. "Thank you, Sally. Please forgive me. I should have found you much sooner, but I was too busy working on my own business," Mr. Sanchez said sadly. When the man finally managed to pull himself together, he called for the deputy head of the HR department and started giving orders, disregarding Sally's presence. First of all, Mr. Sanchez made sure that Sally got a better position at the company. Instead of being the cleaning lady, Sally got appointed manager of the sales department. Then he called Melissa in and told her that she was fired. The truth was that it wasn't the first time that Mr. Sanchez had heard that the senior manager was bullying other employees at the office, and the situation with Sally was simply the last straw that broke the camel's back. From that moment on, all the staff started treating the former cleaning lady very differently, as if by the wave of a magic wand. After learning that Sally had support of the director of the company, Kevin decided to try and revive their relationship. However, Sally rejected his attempts. Sally never liked opportunists, nor was she willing to forgive betrayal. 6 months later, the woman had already become the head of the sales department, and she honestly earned this position thanks to her hard work and perseverance. On the advice of Mr. Sanchez, Sally went to study economics at a university. Never forgetting what Sally's father did for him, Mr. Sanchez helped the young woman any way he could. And 2 years later, Mr. Sanchez walked Sally down the aisle as she married Anthony, a good man from a partner firm. Smiling jokingly, the man said that he was very happy to get to witness his friend's daughter's wedding and that he would love to also attend the wedding of her children. Jerry the cat shared Mr. Sanchez's take on the situation. The cat loved its new master and her new family more than anything in the world.